Welcome to Life with Al, my very first, I guess you could call it my inaugural post. And let me tell you, I'm nervous. I did a couple deep cleansing breaths before I pushed the magic record button. And I hope this gets easier because I have been waffling back and forth for several months. I had it kind of as a fleeting idea, and then I'll share with you in just a few minutes of why I felt like my mom gave me her blessing and permission to do this. And then I decided it was a horrible idea, not going to do it. Then I came back, had an incident where it was really a panic attack, and started thinking about the movie Up, which I know sounds ironic, but bear with me, I'll explain. That really was the catalyst for me deciding, no, I need to make this happen. Still, that was like 6, 7 weeks ago, and I keep going back and forth. And anyway, I said, if I don't do this by the end of the year, I just need to let it go and stop thinking about it. So today's the 31st. I was like, okay, it's now or never. So here I am. Here I am. But so what I want to do today, I guess, first things first, I should introduce myself. I'm Susan, and I am going to share with you why I wanted to do Life with Al, just give a little bit about my backstory, very briefly, and then give you the reasons why I thought it was a good idea, then not a good idea, and then now I think it is, but we'll see. So a little bit about my life with Al, and I'm emphasizing my life with Al because I was very intentional about not calling it our life with Al or my life with Al. I just want it to be life with Al because I don't want it to be all about me and my life here with my mom who has Alzheimer's. I really want it to be applicable to everyone. And I am very aware, and y'all probably are too if you're in the Alzheimer's world and a caregiver, there are 16 million people taking care of someone with Alzheimer's. I mean, that number is just staggering. So I am very aware that ours is one story literally among millions. So I didn't want it just to be, a day in our life. Although I've seen those blogs and I think they're very valuable, I feel like that's not really my intention here, although I'm sure I will be sharing some things. But for the next few minutes, I'll just briefly outline a snapshot of my life with Al. So Alzheimer's has been a part of my life literally my whole adult life. In high school, I worked in as a nursing assistant in memory care, and I can't tell you that I loved it or felt passionate about it. It was a job, and I loved caring for the elderly, but I came home every night depleted, emotionally exhausted, and did not feel like that's anything I would do long term. Then when I went to college, got my psych degree, continued to do that during the summers. And then in graduate school, working on my master's in social work, I was given an internship with the A-Team. Now the A-Team was kind of a novel idea. It was a Alzheimer's specific adult daycare. And back then, like I said, those, they were kind of pioneers. And so while that experience was very valuable, now in hindsight, at the time, I didn't enjoy it at all. In fact, I was so grateful when that year was over. So then I became a medical social worker, started working in hospice, which I loved, had some Alzheimer's patients, so I was exposed to the opposite end. At the adult daycare, obviously those folks were still pretty high functioning. Then I was, there with people at the very end of that journey. So I was only in hospice 4 or 5 years and started noticing some changes in my dad. And honestly, a couple of my family members kind of laughed at it and said, you've been working with Alzheimer's patients and, you're just going to be diagnosing everybody with Alzheimer's. But I saw some personality changes, some paranoia, some very bad business decisions. And then it was a couple years actually till we really started seeing the memory loss. And sadly back then, and this was way back in the mid-90s, early onset was not really talked about. It just wasn't that common. So it really took about 5 years for us to get a true diagnosis, which breaks my heart because I cannot imagine his pain and frustration and the anger of not being able to talk about how he was feeling and that fear of losing control. So I hate that it took us so long to figure things out for him. But things are much different now. Y'all probably know there are brain scans, genetic testing, which I know is still a little, debatable. But I mean, you can, with my mom, we were able to get a definitive diagnosis very quickly. So anyway, things have changed and we've come a long way. So that's good. But so my mom and I cared for my dad, kind of tag teamed it for several years because we were both working part-time in the early stages, and I had two small kiddos. And that worked, and I felt like I learned a lot, and in hindsight I thought I was becoming an expert, but now I know I know there's still so much to learn. So my dad actually had it for about 10 years, died when he was 65, on hospice, was on hospice for 2 years. I'm not going to get into the details of that today, but obviously a very, very heartbreaking and life-changing. I am not going to cry on my first video because that's not good. I mean, this little vlogging gig would be over in a skinny minute, so we're going to suck it up, Buttercup. So anyway, that was hard. And so after that, though, some of y'all may have experienced this. When you go through a struggle, especially something that's prolonged, it kind of makes you or breaks you, gosh, what is Kelly Clarkson's song? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger? Is that it? I think so. But there's truth in those words for sure. So my family came out of that stronger, thankfully. And I became really passionate about hospice. I mean, I was passionate about hospice, but specifically about Alzheimer's. And started facilitating support groups for caregivers. Started requesting if we had Alzheimer's patients that I wanted to be the caregiver, because I really feel like we're kindred spirits, when we're all walking that same path, no matter, if your role's a little different or whatever. If you have a loved one with Alzheimer's, we all get it. So I started doing that. Went into management and hospice, 12, 15 years later. But during that time, I really was volunteering with Alzheimer's organizations, and like I said, not just doing support groups, but also meeting with caregivers one-on-one who were on the brink of burnout. And if you're a caregiver, you know how isolating it can be, how helpless you can feel, and sometimes you just feel like you're the only one struggling with the day-to-day just struggles that we go through. So know that you're not. There's many, many of us out there, but a lot of us, especially if you're in the home with your loved one, you can feel like you're the only one because, like I said, you're isolated. But anyway, so I enjoyed doing that, and then was really felt like I was thriving, kind of pretty good rhythm. And then a couple years ago, started seeing some memory changes in my mom, but she had a lot of other health issues and that I won't get into right now. She's really struggled with chronic pain after a severe car wreck 20 years ago where she was basically crushed on one side of her body, lots of orthopedic surgeries. But anyway, so I kept thinking, okay, maybe it's due to a lot of these other things. I really willed myself into denial because I did not want to go down this path again. Because my mom was such a saint with my dad, and I'll talk about her on later videos, I'm sure, but everybody loves precious Gladys. She's always been a caretaker for others, sacrificially giving of herself, and I did not want this for her. So anyway, finally, probably 7-8 months ago now, I thought, okay, I cannot avoid this any longer. So I took her to the doctor, did some cognitive testing. My worst fear was confirmed. In fact, it was more significant than I thought. And sometimes those of you who have had cognitive assessment and you see it on paper, you're like, wow, I noticed some forgetfulness, but this is really scary. Then we relocated here to Charlotte. We were living in Columbia, actually just a couple hours away, and we combined our houses. And let me tell you, that was a struggle. But it's been 6-7 months, and I think we're finding our new normal. We're getting into a rhythm here, so that's a good thing. So that, in a nutshell, is my life with Al. So what I want to do now is talk real quickly about why I didn't want to do this. So back when my dad was originally diagnosed, I actually had to do an admission with a hospice patient literally that same week. I think it was a day or two later. And I was in the home, and okay, if you are a professional caregiver, I really need for you not to judge me right now, because typically I have very good boundaries, I promise. But this was not my finest moment as a social worker. So I went into the home, and my tears were just right on the surface, and I kept trying to stuff it down. And she looked at me and she said, you know, you seem a little out of sorts. And then tears started trickling. Okay, y'all, that is not good for a social worker. We never want a caregiver or family member to start comforting us. No, we're supposed to be providing the comfort. And I was so embarrassed. And I said, I am so sorry. I said, but my dad was just diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And I had obviously been in the home with others who were dying of Alzheimer's, but I think with it being so just right there with my dad being diagnosed, and it's kind of in my face, okay, this is going to be your dad one day, and it was just overwhelming in that moment. She was very consoling, very loving, and I ended up having him, I think, goodness, it was almost a year. So she and I became very close. Miraculously, she looked past me being a needy person myself on that first visit. But when I asked her, can you tell me kind of what to expect? And because I had seen snapshots at the early stages and then on hospice, but you don't know all that journey, sometimes for years between. So she said, no. She said, you don't need to know that. She said, you need to take it one day at a time. Trust God to give you the grace to get through it in the moment. Don't borrow tomorrow's troubles. And honestly, it made me mad, because my philosophy was knowledge is power. And I needed that knowledge because I was feeling pretty helpless and without any power. And but she said, no, you don't need to know. And so like I said, I was a little angry. But in hindsight, those were very wise words. So I know I was kind of rambling on about that, but my point is, that's why when I first had the fleeting thought, because I was feeling restless here, I used to blog some, I used to enjoy doing a little bit of public speaking here and there, and I thought, maybe I can just, do some blogging. And then I started thinking about that, and I thought, no, that is a horrible idea, because what I would never want to do, what my greatest fear would be, is if I was talking about something that was going on maybe with my dad, or, in fact, probably a lot of what I will share will be things not to do, because believe me, I made a lot of mistakes. And some of them are funny stories, because we got to find the humor, because, how else are we going to do this? But anyway, I decided I don't want to be sharing something that for me was important to learn, and then somebody else is like, oh my gosh, I never even thought about that. That's something else for me to worry about. If somebody ever left this space feeling more stressed or, concerned with me bringing up things that hadn't even crossed their mind, that would be my biggest nightmare. So I decided, nope, not going to do that. I'll do some writing, find other ways to, find purpose. And so Mom and I started, I talked to her about just doing Gladys's gems, not to share with the public or online, just for future generations, for for posterity's sake. And she was all about it. And we did a couple. And then I saw that she was really struggling with knowing she was being taped and not being able to find her words. And so I decided this is not going to be a good idea. So, but I did get some of those, thankfully. But in one of those, when I was recording her, she started talking about not having purpose. And so I talked to her. I didn't call it Life with Al, but I said, well, what if, you have so many words of wisdom, and just your cute little sayings that you say all the time. She's got so many little life mantras. And I said, those might be helpful for other people, Mom. And I said, maybe we could do this and share it online on YouTube or something. And I said, even if it's just a handful of people, family watch it, that would be fun. And she said, oh, absolutely not. She said, and she wasn't comfortable in her appearance anymore, because she's lost 60 pounds in the last year. And, she was saying, I won't know what to say. I'm not a good speaker. She said, but you're a good writer. Mom saying, they got to tell you that. And she said, I think you could be really good at that. She said, you do what you want to do. And if it's going to help people, we always want to help people. And that's her voice. I promise I can nail her every time. So, anyway, she said, but I don't want to be in it. And please don't show pictures of me. And I know a lot of people, I'm on support groups online, Molly's movement is one of my favorite, and I know a lot of people post pictures even at the very end, and I'm not judging that. I think each person has to make their own decisions, but in this space, I won't be doing that because I really want to honor my mom and honor those wishes for her, for us to always see her with that full face, like my full face, and her sweet smile. So I had decided at that point, okay, yes, I'm going to do this because I feel like mom's given me her blessing to do it. But then I did a little bit of research. And I was like, there's so many resources out there. I am one amongst 16 million. Maybe not. But then one night, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep, which is not that unusual for me. But this night it was far worse. And sometimes at night, when I can't sleep, I start reminiscing about hospice patients. And I know that may seem dark, but I promise it is not. It's actually the opposite, because there were so many just sweet people who were so strong and vibrant, not physically in their body, but just watching them, transition to their forever home, as I call it. It was just impacted me so greatly. And then seeing the strength and resilience of the human spirit and their families and caregivers as they went through the grieving process. So anyway, at night, sometimes I think about those things. But this night, this guy came to mind, and he was young. He was late 20s. He'd only been married a few years, and his wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. Well, she was dying in our inpatient hospice house. And I came out of my office, and he was standing next to his room, her room, and he was crying. And so I walked up to him and I said, hey, are you okay? And yes, I know that is a stupid question to ask somebody whose wife is imminently dying, but I did it nonetheless. And he said, hell no, I'm not okay. He said, I'm falling. And I certainly understood his anger. So I just kind of stood back and waited, and because I was curious what he meant. And he said, the day she got diagnosed, I was pushed out of a window. And ever since that day, I've been falling. And eventually I'm going to crash and hit the ground. And that will be the day she dies. But until then, I'm just falling. And I tell you, it left me breathless. That was, goodness, 15, 18 years ago. And I still get emotional thinking about it, because his words were so profound. And the imagery that he used, and he was so articulate in expressing such raw emotion. I had never heard such an accurate description of anticipatory grief. You read, as a grief counselor, you read about anticipatory grief, and, you understand the stages and all of that. But boy, that one picture just summed it all up. And so anyway, I'm laying in the bed in the middle of the night, can't sleep, and I'm thinking about him, and then I started weeping, and then I almost got hysterical, and I was like, that's how I feel. I'm falling. I'm in this perpetual state of dread, and I am not a depressed person by nature. And I've enjoyed being back in Charlotte, certainly being back in my hometown, but there's always was this fog, this kind of cloud of, what's coming. It's going to get worse. You don't know how long this stage is going to last. You don't know if she's going to have this issue. What if it's as bad as Daddy? And so as this is swirling in my mind, my breath is getting quicker. I was like, I am not going to have a panic attack. I've only had 2 in my life, and they are not fun. So I turned on my Calm app. If y'all don't use the Calm app, you need to, because it is really good. And so I started listening to my meditation music, just really praying. And I just, in that moment, was desperately praying, God, please give me some type of sign that I am going to be able to do this, because I don't think I have the strength. And God doesn't typically answer my prayers like that. Typically, He doesn't change the situation. He changes my attitude, but it's not that I get this definitive and quick of a thought. So, doing my deep breathing, listening to my favorite little night music on Calm, and this is what came to mind. I started thinking about the movie Up. And y'all would know, if you haven't seen the movie, you really need to. It's my all-time favorite. But the big bouquet of vibrant balloons. And I started thinking, okay, what if I can just visualize I'm not falling to this chaotic crash. I am got my big bouquet of balloons and I'm going to drift and we're going to be able to be okay and not just plummet with this constant anxiety. And so as I was thinking about this, I started visualizing each balloon being representative of my mom, her talents, her traits, just her whole personality, just the essence of who Gladys is, her whole life story. So I started thinking about those things, and I thought, I want to hang on to that. And if I am so wrapped up with worry and anxiety and perpetual dread, I'm not going to be able to enjoy the time we have left. And my goodness, the only good thing I think about a degenerative disease is we have time. We have time not to have regrets. We have time to do the things we want to do. Reminiscing with our loved one, just continuing to make special memories. And when they can no longer remember, we do that for them and for ourselves. So I was thinking about these things, and I thought, okay, I know that Al is going to pop these balloons. He just is. And y'all will get used to me personifying Alzheimer's. It's a coping mechanism that a lot of us use so that if we get frustrated or whatever, we can blame Al and not our lovely loved one, because it's never them, it's Al. So I know Al's going to pop those balloons. And, and some of them, maybe we should just see it more as they're going to drift away. But regardless, we're going to descend and we're going to decline. And we know that ultimately we are going to hit the ground. But if we can do that while still hanging on to our balloons as long as possible, that's going to give us time to prepare. And preparing is key. We grieve the little losses as they come. And please hear me, I am not being dismissive of the pain of grieving the losses along the way. Just the, I don't want to minimize just the day-to-day stress of caring for someone, because that is significant. But at the same time, we have to find joy every day. We have to find the humor. And if y'all come back to this space, I hope you will, I can be very sarcastic, and I hope that never comes across as disrespectful. It's just my way to cope, and it's my sense of humor. But anyway, we have to do those things because life is too short, and our loved ones would want us to live fully and enjoy, whatever time we have with them, and then, cherish those memories. But my hope and my goal is, as we slowly drift down, that when we hit the bottom, it's not going to be a jarring hit. It's going to be, how can I describe it? It's going to be a soft landing. It's going to be a gentle passing. And I know that may be hard for some people to understand, but when you get to a certain point, oftentimes, I should say, you're ready to let go, because you know that person needs to be freed from that broken body and that fractured mind. And then, with my dad, at least, I started praying for that release for months before he passed. So again, that is my hope and my prayer. And I need to wrap this up. I'm sorry. As I said, I swear, I did not plan that. But, I was talking about Up, the movie, and that was a great little segue, wrapping it up. What I don't want to happen, I just want to reiterate this real quickly, and I wanted to keep this under 15 minutes, and I'm at 23, so sorry guys, I'm going to try to keep the future one shorter. But what I never want to do, like I mentioned before, is somebody to leave here more stressed or more burdened. I would love for everybody to leave this space happy. I know that is a very lofty goal, and probably isn't going to happen all the time, but I think it is a realistic goal for all of us to gain confidence as we lean on each other, and just sometimes ignorance is bliss, like I had originally thought, with that conversation I had with my that patient's loved one. But sometimes knowledge is power, and I waffle back and forth between the two. But I hope that, especially if your loved one is newly diagnosed and you're shell-shocked and your world is spinning, I hope that somehow together, we can give each other more confidence to know that we can do this, and we're not isolated. We are certainly not alone. And even if you're a long-distance caregiver or your loved one's in a facility, I mean, you are still a full-time caregiver. If you love that person, if you're committed to them, dedicated to them, you are still, in my eyes, a full-time caregiver. So I hope the things here will not just be relevant for those of us who are living in the home with our loved one. But anyway, with that, I am gonna close. I want the best for all of us, and again, my hope is that when we get to the end and we say our final goodbyes, that we will know that we stayed the course. You know, we were present to bear witness, and we did our best. I'm not going to cry. And, you know, that's all any of us can ever do. And so with that, until next time, take care.